Good morning, guys. So this today, I wanted to talk about my car accident a little bit, and a thing I've been using, or a skill, or a discipline, even as like I did it in the moment, and as I've talked to people about my car accident, I've highlighted this point because it's actually been a key component in how I viewed the situation. And I'm reading Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within, right? Yeah. And I just got to this part where he's talking about this skill set or discipline. I've obviously read it before, but just read it again today. And so I decided I wanted to talk about this. So, in short, what ended up happening with our car accident is we were on the Salmo mountain pass, coming down right from the peak, hit really bad ice. The roads hadn't been paved or graveled or salted, anything like that. Started to fishtail, and at this point I was already in third gear. I had no foot on the brake or the gas, only going about 80. Started to fishtail, tried to recover just by trying to counter steer. That wasn't helping. It started getting worse. There was a semi truck coming up on the left side, and so all I knew is I didn't want to go into oncoming traffic. I didn't want to spin out of control. So I think subconsciously I tried to drift to the right, and so in that subconscious trying to gain control, as I accepted almost that we were getting more out of control, then I applied pressure on the brakes to try to slow down as much as possible. And what ended up happening is we did drift to the right, ended up hitting the ditch, and then when we hit the ditch, we ran head on into basically a rock jut that came out of the mountainside, collided with that head on. That was the main part of the impact. Airbags deployed, and then we had enough momentum that we went over the rock jut also. So it ended up tipping the vehicle on the driver's side door, and that's where we landed. And then Cherie climbed out. There's a lot more, but I'm being brief. But Cherie climbed out the passenger side window. I helped push her out, and then I climbed out myself. Fortunately, there was people there right away, but I was surprisingly calm in the situation, and I think that chalks up to a lot of the work I do. I think particularly meditation, in which I just didn't go in any bad spirals, and the part I want to talk about, which is what I actually did very quickly, 5 minutes after the accident, maybe less, is I already determined that the accident was inconvenient. That was my languaging. It wasn't horrific, it wasn't a tragedy, it wasn't terrible, it was just inconvenient. Because I'd learned this before, is that languaging is the filtering mechanism in which we perceive the world and perceive reality. Is we can't control the situations or what happened to us, but we can certainly control how we act or interpret, or what stories or what meaning we associate with these situations. So because I had known this and had used it and in some ways trained myself already, I labeled the situation as inconvenient, which allowed me to stay at an emotional state of inconvenience. It's like, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't we were both okay. We were a little injured, but nothing. It wasn't horrific, and so that would have been an inappropriate label. It wasn't a tragedy. That would have been an inappropriate label. But this highlights the point right here: is it can go either way. I could have labeled it horrific and a tragedy, and that's what it would have been in my mind, and thus my emotional state about the situation would have been much more elevated, would have been much more heightened. And I could have programmed different things. I could have made this more of a traumatic experience because I could have labeled it with a higher emotional intensity. But I consciously chose a much lower emotional intensity. And it wasn't like I was lying to myself. It's it's I chose that belief, and that belief fit with reality. Is again, we both walked out alive, conscious, safe, and so that it really was just inconvenient. Then I had to deal with figuring out what to do, who to report to, all of that stuff. And I've used this in the past before. I think even before I knew about it, I did it a little subconsciously, or just stumbled upon it. It wasn't conscious. I just know upon reflecting. There was a time in my life where, when I was saving to go traveling for the first time, I was super on the right path in terms of I was just so happy about the present moment and so happy about the future, and I was working really hard, and that work was paying off and producing the results I needed. AKA, I was saving money in the bank, which was proof that I was going to accomplish what I wanted, which was to go travel. And in that period of about 9 months, I was just in such a good place all the time. And whenever people asked me how I was, instead of this default like I'm well, or I'm okay, or I'm good, I was using words like amazing and incredible, because that's how I really felt. But what's funny is I felt that way, but also the languaging I used further concreted that. Is not only did I feel great, but I further proved that to myself by the languaging I used. Because the opposite is true, is I could have just defaulted to saying I'm well, I'm good, and that is a different emotional intensity. So even though I might have felt amazing, if I constantly said I'm good and I'm well, it would have lowered my emotional state. So instead, I luckily spoke honestly, which usually surprise people and takes, because people aren't expecting that, is I'm amazing, I'm fantastic. And so that languaging, again, further just resonated and kept me at that emotional state. And so conversely, the opposite is true again. Or sorry, not the opposite is, so not only can languaging reinforce, but languaging can actually bring us to that place. So what I mean is, and this is where some people get hung up without realizing that how much control we have of our emotional state is actually whether or not we're making a conscious decision. So you could feel crappy, and you could focus on feeling crappy, and you could use languaging to keep you in that state. Like when someone asks you how you are, you could say, I'm not well, I'm having a shitty day. Or instead, and this isn't like a fake it till you make it thing, this is proven science, you could use languaging to map towards the feeling you want to have. So even though you might not be feeling good, by consciously choosing the words you use to describe your reality, you can bring yourself to that state. So if you're having an off day, the reason you might be having an off day is because you're focusing on the things that went wrong. You could easily focus on one thing that went right in the day and have a good day. There could be 10 things that went wrong, and you could focus on those 10 things and then determine your day went wrong. Or you could focus on the one thing that went right. Or even if you didn't have that, take it one step back and just focus on simple gratitudes. Like, what can you be grateful for? And that can change your emotional state. So again, it's not about covering up emotions and faking it, because we feel like a fraud to ourselves when we fake it. So it's not about faking it. It's about really consciously choosing the emotions you want to feel and making them real. So again, it's like you could be having an off day, but that's because that's where you're focusing on. And so you can use languaging to help you get out of that. It's like when someone asks you how you are, you can be, I'm doing well because of X. Or it's like, I'm feeling great because I realized I can be grateful for the fact that I woke up this morning. And it's see how already we can change our state through conscious, intentional action. And I think I'm going to leave it at that because this can go lots of ways, but I wanted to, there's a bunch of things I want to talk about, but I'm trying to be concise and keep on one topic. And so I'm going to stop for today, and I will see you guys tomorrow.